Today, Y Combinator funds hundreds of companies at a time, and it's the only place in the world that produces generational companies like Stripe, Airbnb, Coinbase, and a whole lot more, again and again and again. That's not normal, but nothing about YC really is.
I don't want 7 companies worth $1 trillion with half of the S&P. Like, I would like to see thousands of companies. Like, we have 2 whole tables of founders from DC right here.
Woo, love it, love it.
And wouldn't it be great that we have homegrown unicorns at that table? That would be what prosperity and the American dream looks like to me.
Hello and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Kat Zakreski, a national tech policy reporter here at the Post. And my first guest today is Gary Tan. He is the CEO and president of Y Combinator, a startup incubator in the Bay Area that has produced companies like Dropbox, Airbnb, and Reddit. Gary, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kat.
And it's so good to see you again. We obviously met when I was a startup reporter out in the Bay Area, and recently I've been seeing a lot of Silicon Valley investors here in DC. Can you tell me a little bit about why VCs and startups are showing up here more often?
I think we're at the dawn of a brand new platform, and when that sort of occurs, we have to make sure that there is space for the little guy. Even Google itself started in the shadow of Microsoft at the end of the day, in a garage in Mountain View, to PhDs from Stanford working on what now has touched billions of lives. And so when a new platform comes to bear, and that's certainly what Sam Altman and OpenAI have brought to us by sort of teaching us that scaling is something that does work when it comes to large language models. We know that that's a moment where we want to make sure that there's a seat at the table for that next Google. And that's why we're spending more time in DC. And I think everyone's sort of realizing your tech can't sort of sit back and not participate. We have to make sure that the little startups have a voice.
And certainly the Metas, the Googles, Amazon, they've become some of the most dominant lobbying players here in Washington over the last decade. Can you tell me a little bit about how your policy priorities in the startup community might diverge from theirs?
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with capitalism. We are all capitalists at heart. It's literally in the definition of our job title, venture capitalists. We want ventures that can go on to create actually really great value and wealth for people. What we really want is choice. And so when there's a new platform, whether it's Windows or the browser or the search engine, what we want is a fair and open playing field for people to be able to build technology. We want that engineer who has an idea to be able to actually go out and get users, get customers, and build standalone businesses. And when we're not thoughtful about it, it becomes very difficult to do so. And I hate to say it, but I think that that's sort of the world we live in right now. A lot of people use the iPhone. I am one of them, but I, for one, do not use Siri. And OpenAI yesterday at their Dev Day released an incredible voice API. But we should just start counting the days for how long it's going to take for that kind of world-changing technology to actually make it into the hardware and the default setting. And so, really, that's something that we should pay attention to when we talk about big tech sort of concentrating power. That really comes down to exactly that. Large language models and the intelligence of GPT-4, even 3.5, have been with us for several years now, and yet there's none of us use Siri, or very few people use Siri, because it is using technology that is many generations behind. And I can't point to anything else. I mean, there are too many other examples of that, whether it's self-preferencing in the search space, or only recently did Apple open up tap to pay. There are so many places where we want consumers to have choice, and I think that that's something that we should all pay attention to.
And you just talked about the issue of concentration of power in the economy. We've seen Lena Khan, Jonathan Cantor, some members of the administration file massive antitrust suits against some of the bigger companies, and you've expressed some support for that action. But we've also heard others, like Reid Hoffman, call on the Harris campaign to take a different direction. I mean, what's your response to your fellow Silicon Valley investors who have opposed the actions that we've seen from this FTC and DOJ?
I mean, big respect to what they've done in their careers, and obviously Reid has done incredible work for AI broadly, but I think we can agree to disagree on that.
And speaking of agree to disagree, I mean, we're at a point where obviously a lot of attention is on the election, and obviously last night had the debate. We've seen an interesting political realignment in some ways in Silicon Valley over the past few months. And Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, two other prominent venture capitalists, recently put out a podcast where they said that Donald Trump is the best candidate for little tech. You've said that you support Kamala Harris. Why do you think there's this divergence within the little tech community?
I think there's space for a big tent here. I think we have lots of friends who are Republicans or supporting the Republican ticket. One thing I want to really sort of mark a departure from is, I am a Democrat, but I don't support sort of this some of the invective against people who frankly are not that far over on the aisle. I personally, from my experience in San Francisco politics, is what we desperately need both locally in Sacramento and nationally is a much more nuanced conversation about the policies themselves, less invective. And if anything, the debate last night I thought was far more cordial than past debates, and that's a good sign, actually.
And on that point of being a bit more specific, I mean, what about Harris's tech policies appeal to you as a so-called little tech investor?
I think that she's coming around. I follow what Mark Cuban's been sort of working with the campaign on. I think that there is a space to actually create new markets. For instance, with cryptocurrency, it's clear that software is eating the world and it's eating money. And stable coins in particular are an extremely bright spot for blockchain and crypto technologies to actually bring democratization of that to everyone. And I am really heartened by their movement on that. I think that ultimately Kamala is going to, I think that from her time as a prosecutor in San Francisco, my sense is that, she can be top cop Kamala. I'm hopeful for her to sort of bring common sense to the nation.
And I want to ask you a little bit about just some of the criticism that we've seen of the little tech movement. GW professor David Karp recently wrote a column that was titled, "The Little Tech Agenda is Just Self-Serving Nonsense." And so I just wanted to ask you, I mean, what's your response to critics who see this agenda as just a way for Silicon Valley investors to push policies that might further enrich themselves?
I guess, I would reply, in what world is it advantageous for society for, the S&P to be dominated by just a few companies, maybe half a dozen that each have $1 trillion in market cap? I mean, I think that type of concentration is actually, fundamentally bad for a republic. I would much rather see thousands of companies all in competition actually serving the marketplace, and that gives us choice. I mean, when you talk about what kind of future we want to live in, that's the kind of future that I do want to live in. It's a world in which consumers don't have to get their data sort of with no choice. You can't actually make a different decision. You're sort of at the whim of what a corporation might want to do with your data or with your digital life. I think that that's on, even when it comes to speech, that's like an ongoing concern as well. Ultimately, what we want is decentralization of power, and decentralization of power um, ultimately is what will actually drive a society that is fundamentally better. On the flip side, like I think one thing that people don't understand about Silicon Valley is that um, even things like Google. Today, you think of it as sort of this rock of tech. You can't imagine a time that Google didn't exist. But it is worth reminding people that even these big tech companies, they started as just a few people with just an idea with very small amounts of money, and all they're doing is earnestly trying to build a thing that they're interested in. If you look at early interviews with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, they said, we started Apple with no intention of ever starting a company, ever building it into a business, and yet here we are. And all we want to do is actually preserve the ability for that next generation to actually participate in this incredible process. I think that this is about being growth mindset and creating, 1+1 = 3, because a year or two ago, a lot of these capabilities, the rocks can talk. They can actually read. They can actually reason. And much has been made of sort of hallucination, that people think, oh, this is a fad. This is not going to stick around. I think that what we're seeing at Y Combinator with the companies, with the 2 or 3 people just starting out, they're able to build revenue, get customers, and build real standalone businesses from nothing. And a good number of them will actually go on to create billion-dollar companies. And YC has done that for upwards of $600 billion worth of market value since 2005. And I think YC is just getting started. And it really is about protecting those founders.
And I want to talk a little bit more about YC, because your summer 2024 batch, about 75% of those companies were in the AI space. And we're at a moment right now where some people are starting to ask, is there an AI bubble happening? What's your response to them?
I think like any moment where a new platform happens, we don't know who are quite the winners yet. And so there will be mega rounds. You can easily just look at the history of uh, Inktomi versus Google versus Alta Vista. These are sort of other names that were lost to the sands of time. But this is actually a really exciting moment when you look at the bubble of 2000. Um, they were wrong about a good number of companies, but directionally speaking, when you take it all in aggregate, these are all products that we use day to day, and that's actually the destructive sort of creation of uh, both venture capital and early stage startups. Period. There will be a winner, and in aggregate, everyone wins from being able to organize all of the world's information through Google. I think it's hard to find people who would say we wish that we didn't have search engines. And I think that that's happening right now again with large language models. So we can expect things like 2000, but in the long, long run, this will be a huge net benefit to society. And I think this is writ large the same thing that has happened with software, sort of and automation. It's sort of the same debate that we've been having for upwards of 80 years with software and automation. If you look at accounting, for instance, the biggest accounting firm in 1963, um, you know, they had something like 200 employees, and inflation adjusted, we're making about um, $400 million in today's dollars. Deloitte alone had $65 billion in revenue, and collectively the Big Four employ more than 1 million people. So I know that you're about to have sort of your next speaker who's going to talk about how this reinvigorates the middle class, but that's how it happens. Actually, this is sort of um, a magic that is working itself into society now. And it's happening through earnest engineers and builders making things that basically make knowledge work a lot easier, faster, better, cheaper. And that's a very good thing.
And On that point, I mean, as you're looking ahead to the next batch for Y Combinator, where are some of the sectors where you're looking? What are you most excited about when you look for new AI applications?
Absolutely. I think the most exciting thing that we're seeing is actually the specific verticals. Just as Google sort of took off, and at this is sort of why we're interested in AI regulation. That we want to be able to continue to preserve the ability for people to create new products and services that directly address things that consumers actually want. And there is a danger where there can be a lot of self-preferencing. If you're a large language model provider, you're a little bit like Windows. You're a little bit like Google search. You sort of know what businesses are good, and you might be tempted to actually compete with your very own API customers. So I think that that's one of the longer term things that we're worried about, and ultimately, like the app level, the ability for smart people who have a specific domain expertise to focus on, for instance, accounting software. I worked with a company called Phase Shift this last summer. What they do is actually automate accounts receivable, and it's pretty wild. They're able to sort of take a team that has 12 people on the finance team that are just doing accounts receivable and reduce the actual workload to one person, and those other 11 people worked on other parts of the finance organization. And I think to talk about this accounting case again, like the number of people working in accounting pre-automation to post-automation, there weren't a million Americans working in the Big Four or the sort of the accounting world prior to software. When you add software, you add value, and those firms now do so many other things other than literally sitting there tabulating ledgers. And I think that's an important fact that we're excited about. Ultimately, we want these companies to go on to create millions of jobs, to create great jobs that are not to quote Rick and Morty, just butter passing, right? Automation actually will take away rote jobs that are frankly not that great. Like they're not that intellectually stimulating. What we hope is that humans can do more things that only humans can do.
That's a really interesting point, and one that I think we're going to dig into in the next segment quite a bit. I want to turn, you mentioned your activity in San Francisco politics earlier, and you've been very active there. You've developed a reputation where some have called you a, quote, Twitter menace because of some of the comments you've made online about politics there. Can you tell me a little bit about who you're planning to support in the upcoming mayoral election?
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, I'm pretty excited about the mayoral election. We have three really great candidates. Mark Farrell, incredible. London Breed, incredible. Lurie, I'd probably rank number 3 if I were you. But if any of them are mayor, I think that San Francisco is well on its way to the boom loop, which is this moment where, frankly, at YC, we're funding 500, 600 companies per year, on average 5 to 10% of them, we think, will go on to become worth $1 billion or more. And, today we're talking about unprecedented amounts of commercial real estate empty, a hollowing out of the downtown. Our, very deep intention is that in the middle of this AI revolution, we are going to fill those office towers. We're going to bring thousands of incredible jobs. And I think that great governance is actually about taking that bounty of prosperity from technology and spreading it throughout society through great government. So, actually through state capacity, through actually building great schools, through actually assuring public safety, through actually funding treatment and recovery instead of supporting policies that cause people to just do drugs on the street until they die. We have to have a top to bottom realignment, reset of San Francisco from the doom loop to the boom loop. But if we can fix it in San Francisco, we will fix it everywhere.
And so you've told us who you would rank third in the race, but who would you rank number one?
I'm still thinking through that. I haven't made up my own choice. I mean, I know Farrell and Mayor Breed personally, and they are both incredible choices.
Got it. Well, do you think now that you're getting more active in DC politics, you'll become known as a Twitter menace in this town too?
There's something very special to San Francisco that, it should probably stay in San Francisco.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Gary, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and please stay tuned for our next segment. Thank you.
Welcome to this conversation on how businesses are harnessing artificial intelligence. My name is Lana Wong, and I'm a founding member of the Diverse Women Moderators Bureau, Moderate the Panel. I'm excited to be joined here today with SAP's Chief Marketing Officer for Business AI, Brenda Baum. So, AI has immense potential for positive impact, but there are significant risks as well. With things moving so quickly in AI and generative AI, businesses are faced with the challenge of how to use these tools effectively, but also to maintain ethical standards around data privacy, security, and transparency. In Brenda's role, she actually leads SAP's strategy for integrating responsible AI into their enterprise solutions. So let's hear how she balances this cutting edge innovation with a commitment to ethics. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you for having me, Lana.
So let's dive in. How do you think businesses are being shaped by AI, and what is SAP's strategy to add value?
Well, as you mentioned, we know that AI is taking center stage on how people work and live today. So the questions that I hear all the time from customers is one, how I can use it in a way that I see immediate benefit, and what is the value that I can extract from it. So we're past the hype and we're now in the stage where customers want to realize that value. And we have found that businesses that implement AI have a scalable ROI, and they improve their employees' day-to-day work on both an individual and on a team level. So we know that AI will continue to save companies and entire industries money and time. However, on a personal level, people can be more productive, focus on the tasks that require unique skills, more human interaction, or more creativity. We see that, Lana, with our customers. We have over 27,000 customers around the world that are benefiting from SAP Business AI capabilities because of that incremental business value that they see in the use cases that we create for our customers. And you probably have heard that we are well underway to having more than 100 high-value AI use cases across the SAP portfolio, which means across all of the applications that we have, and that over 80% of the most used tasks that our customers perform are going to be infused or are infused already with Joule, which is our generative AI copilot. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But that really helps our customers be more productive and more efficient. I'll give you an example. Accenture is a customer of ours, and they use SAP Business AI in their cash flow processes. So they streamline and they improve the forecasting, and they have achieved an accuracy of over 90% in their forecasting, and they have saved more than 57,000 hours in just the first year by automating 95% of all their accounting commentaries.
Amazing. That's a powerful example. So you've talked about the adding value bit, but how does your business AI strategy really differentiate from the other offerings out there?
So the SAP's Business AI strategy is threefold. So first, we embed and infuse AI in all of SAP's applications. So we talked about our SAP portfolio, which is a breadth of applications that we have. And AI will continue to be part of that fabric of SAP applications. So it's infused where value is already generated and where our customers are running their business processes. So applications like HR and supply chain and customer experience, customers are going to see the benefit of AI infused in those applications. The second one is Joule. So Joule is our AI copilot, and it crosses, again, all of our SAP portfolio. Joule is embedded and accessible through the business processes, through conversational interactions. So Joule goes beyond individual productivity, and it does deliver high value insights across all of the business outcomes that customers are looking at. So you can simply ask a question, describe what you need, and Joule is going to quickly respond, leveraging all the richness of the data and the insights that it has access to. And finally, we want to make sure that AI is accessible to everyone, right? So we have built in the ability to create customized extensions, and customers can do this in SAP's Generative AI Hub. So that allows them to not only leverage the out-of-the-box use cases that we are creating, but also develop, deploy, and manage any customizations or any extensions that they need. And we also talked a little bit about Joule, but our generative AI copilot, which is Joule, is one copilot and one easy access point to all of your business applications. So you can think about how you access your SAP system from HR, supply chain, or finance, or service and sales. Joule is right there at your fingertips to help you solve any questions and have access to all of the AI that is infused or that you have customized or extended.
Great. So let's turn to privacy. How do you account for bias and privacy issues and really ensure that customers' data remains private as you embed AI across your solutions?
This is a super important topic, Lena, so I'm very glad that we're touching on it. And this really follows our commitment in SAP to responsible AI. So SAP upholds our very high standards with respect to data privacy, data protection, cybersecurity, and local regulations. We are committed to the security of our customers' data and do not share it with any third-party LLM providers for training or improvement of their models. And we really go back many years. In 2018, SAP was one of the first companies to define guiding principles for responsible AI in its software. And we continue to uphold those standards. And we have an ethics board as well that looks at all the use cases that we talked about to make sure that the data is ethically sourced. And we can also understand the governance behind that data. So that requires every AI use case to be reviewed by our AI ethics committee. And that involves external ethics experts as well. So we make sure, as an example, for example, when checking how well a candidate resume matches a job description in SAP Fieldglass, which is an application, we remove all the personal identification data from the text extracted from that resume by the AI model. So we have the regulations, but we have also very practical ways to ensure the data privacy and compliance.
That's fantastic. Well, on that note, we'll have to wrap it up here, but thank you so much, Brenda. And it's great to hear about SAP's real commitment to responsible AI in this exciting roller coaster time of AI. So thank you all for joining us. And if you have any thoughts or ideas, please add your thoughts online with the hashtag #PostLive. My name is Lana Wong, and now I'm happy to hand it back to our colleagues at the Washington Post.
Computing, as we understand it, has actually not been that great for growth and really created a lot of inequality. I think AI has the potential to work quite differently.
Well, welcome back. For those of you just joining us, I'm Kat Zakreski, National Tech Policy Reporter here at the Washington Post. My next guest is David Autor, a professor of economics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a labor economist. David, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Kat. It's a pleasure to be here.
And so I want to start the conversation because there's a lot of fears right now about the potential for AI to displace workers and automate jobs. Why do you think some of those fears might be misplaced?
Well, let me start by saying that there are going to be winners and losers. And I think people are simultaneously insufficiently optimistic and insufficiently pessimistic because there will be displacement. And this is always true in episodes of technological change. Think of all the office workers or production workers who are displaced by computer technology, or think of those longshoremen who are striking along the coast of the United States. They're worried about automation, and they're not wrong. If it weren't for their labor actions, in fact, a lot more of their work would be automated. But automation doesn't is a limited subset of what we do with new technologies. We also use new technologies to create new capabilities, and those new capabilities create new work and new demands for expertise. Many of the jobs that we do just wouldn't exist without the technological underpinnings that make them feasible. Like we wouldn't, if it weren't for technology, we wouldn't have flight. We wouldn't have penicillin. We wouldn't have electricity. We wouldn't have telecommunications. We wouldn't be speaking over Skype. And those new innovations do two things. They do several things. One thing is they sort of create a new set of possibilities. They expand the domain of human capabilities. The other thing they do is they create new requirements for human skills that create good jobs and reward people. But the people who are on the upside of that are not always the same people who are on the downside of that. And so our concern should be two things. One, we should be concerned about the displacement, and we should have policies and supports in place that help people make successful transitions. We should not pretend that's not going to happen. It always has happened. The other is we should be keeping an eye on expertise. And what makes labor valuable in industrialized countries is expert knowledge to do some specific thing that's valuable to do and that not everybody knows how to do and requires human labor, right? Could be coding an app. It could be remodeling a house. It could be taking care of a cancer patient. It could be cooking an excellent meal. And so what we worry about when we see technology displacing jobs or workers is that it often displaces expert work and sends people into generic work that doesn't require specialized training or knowledge. So food service, cleaning, bus driving, even daycare. And these are incredibly valuable activities. They're socially important, but they are poorly paid because they don't require specialized training or certification. So our concern should not be the number of jobs. We're actually running out of workers, not running out of jobs because of our demographics, but whether we have jobs that reward people's expertise and knowledge rather than jobs that displace expertise and knowledge and don't leave people with a viable, highly paid thing to do.
And you've specifically written about how AI could fundamentally change the value of human expertise. Can you talk a little bit about how the middle class specifically might benefit from that?
Sure. So let me start by talking about the last 40 years. So the last 40 years of traditional computing, trad computing, if you will, has seen a lot of displacement of workers from office, clerical, administrative support, production, operative positions. Why were those things so heavily exposed in a negative way? Well, because they followed well understood rules and procedures that used to require a lot of education and literacy and numeracy, and now can be written in software, codified and executed by machines that don't have judgment, machines that don't come up with new ideas, machines that don't improvise, but they can do those major tasks. And so that has displaced a lot of middle skill workers. AI is really quite different from that traditional computing. Unlike traditional computing, AI is actually not very good at math or facts. It's not good at following rules. What it is good at is supporting decision making, in taking information from patterns and large bodies of data and making good guesses about what to do. And why is that so valuable? Well, a lot of the valuable work in industrialized economies is effectively decision-making work. It's expert work, whether it's saying how to care for a cancer patient or how to engineer a building or how to rewire a house or how to write a legal document or make a compelling argument. It requires individuals with good judgment to make kind of high stakes one-off decisions where there's no clear correct answer, no clear wrong answer, but there's a whole range of outcomes, right? So you can see a doctor and get good care, mediocre care, or really great care. And the difference could be life and death, but there's not a known right answer. And AI enables, used well, it provides kind of guidance and guardrails for people to do that type of valuable decision making without necessarily being absolutely at the frontier of what they do at the highest level of education. So we can see more people, for example, being able to do software development, more people being able to write certain types of legal documents, more people to use better medical tools to do better diagnosis, up and down the line, not just doctors, but nurse practitioners and nurses and care technicians. We could see educators become more effective using these tools well. We could see people who do skilled repair solving harder problems. And so what AI can potentially do, and let me be clear, it's not that AI will do this, we have to do this. AI will not decide how AI is used, and we have lots of discretion in making that choice. It is not, the future is not yet written. Is it would enable more people to do that kind of decision making, that kind of valuable work. So let's see, I thought I had an example in mind, but I'm going to pause for a moment until it comes back to me. So please, back to you.
Well, so I mean, you just mentioned the point that, humans have a lot of discretion over how this technology evolves and the impact it has on our economy. What policies should the White House, for instance, be pursuing right now to ensure that this doesn't exacerbate inequality, but potentially closes it, like you've suggested?
Good. So there's sort of policy operates on sort of three levels. I think the first thing many people think about is regulation, and there is a role for regulation for sure. For example, I think intellectual property laws need to be recrafted for the age of AI, because I don't think people are being remunerated for the way their ideas and creative work is being used by machines at this point. So there's regulation about rights, there's regulation about safety, there's regulation about monitoring and intrusion, but fundamentally, controlling what doesn't happen is only one part of it. We need to think about what we want to happen. And what we want to happen is actually to use this tool to improve the quality of services and improve the jobs that people can obtain doing those services. So take two sectors, healthcare and education. Between the two of them, they're at least $1 in $5, 20% of GDP. And a lot of that money is public money, right? Educational money, we think of ourselves as having a private medical system, but ultimately about half of all medical care is paid for by some combination of Medicare and Medicaid and other government supports. Plus we pay for the R&D. So we could say, let's use these tools to make sure, A, we provide those services more effectively, make them more accessible, make them more, safer, et cetera, but also enable more people to do that work. So I like to give the example, some people don't like this example, I will admit that, of nurse practitioners. Nurse practitioners are registered nurses who have an additional master's degree and expert training. And I want to emphasize, nurse practitioners are not a technological phenomenon. This is actually a valiant social movement to allow nurses to do more valuable medical work. But now they do things that used to be exclusively limited to doctors. They do treatment, they do diagnosis, they prescribe pharmaceuticals. And they're heavily supported by technology, by electronic medical records, by diagnostic software, by software that looks for drug interactions. And that enables them to do more valuable work. A world in which we have more medical care done by people who don't have that additional 5 years of education or don't have a PhD, but are able to provide effective services to more people. Not only does that make healthcare better, but that creates a set of jobs that will be highly paid because they're expert and will create better careers. So we push so many people out of the middle with automation through computerization, through changes in office software, changes in production, to enable more people who are not among the most elite educated. Remember, less than half of American workers have a college degree. Enable them to do software, healthcare, law at a higher level with lots of training. That's a great opportunity, and would be using AI well, and it will require not just regulation but investment in here's where we want to make those things happen, and we need to build them out. And let me say just another word on investment, right? Lots and lots of technology is steered by the public sector. China has made an enormous investment, for example, in surveillance and in real-time content filtering. And they use AI for that. And it's actually a remarkable technological achievement, but it's not intrinsic to AI. It's a choice of what to prioritize. We could also prioritize making healthcare more accessible. we could prioritize making education more engaging and cheaper and available elsewhere. We can use these tools to accomplish, to complement what people know and help them to extend that expertise to do more valuable work. And I think that's the potential for AI. And it's really quite different from just having machines that follow rules. It's machines that can support making decisions that are high stakes, they require judgment, and we can do them better with better tools.
Is the US economy currently set up to incentivize that kind of investment in healthcare and education, or do you need greater intervention for that to occur?
It's a question of government capacity, and it's very difficult for the government to do a lot at the moment, given our polarized political systems. But I would say the Biden administration has tried to prioritize these things, not just about safety, but also in thinking about the structure of apprenticeships, of the growth of occupations, and seeding investments in, for example, the Chips and Science Act also created all these technology centers. So I think the answer is the government is partially prepared, but not fully. The government already pays for a lot of medical research. So the National Institute of Health is just enormous, and a lot of our health technology comes out of that, then eventually gets patented by the private sector. But that means the government has the capacity to influence what happens in research, and also because the government pays for so much of the healthcare to the private sector, it has the capacity to influence how health is organized. So, for example, most hospitals and doctor's offices you go to now have electronic medical records. That didn't actually happen on its own. During the Obama administration, during the great financial crisis, they passed the High Tech Act as a form of stimulus that essentially subsidized all U.S. hospitals to adopt electronic medical records. They weren't doing it on their own. So the National Science Foundation makes grants to universities and helps to set the priorities of academics for what they research. And we're giving money, huge subsidies to companies like Intel and otherwise. So the answer is yes, the government has many tools at its disposal and a lot of economic heft to shape, not to dictate, but to shape. Whether it uses that power to set an agenda depends on policymakers and lawmakers, and of course, who we vote into office.
And let's talk a little bit more about who some of the losers might be in this technological shift, because you've laid out some clear examples where we could see big wins and gains, but what sectors and workers are you most concerned about in the coming years?
Well, so first of all, I'm very concerned about people who do creative work like illustration or animation, even journalism, and anywhere where your kind of intellectual property is put out there online and then can be absorbed and replicated, by machines. And you could say, oh, that's fair use. That's what our fair use law allows. Or you could say it's not. But of course, fair use law was not written with this technology in mind. We never thought we'd have machines that would absorb the full corpus of human knowledge and then, kind of recycle it without paying any royalties. This is a fixable problem, by the way, right? There was a time when people expected to get music for free on the internet through Napster. And then, logically, eventually said, look, you can't just do that. You have to pay for royalties for that. And that way we can support artists and musicians who actually make this stuff. Now we all expect to pay for a subscription to Apple Music or Spotify. This is a completely solvable problem with AI as well. But if we don't solve it, I'm very worried about those individuals. And I think that that would be a failure of regulation. I'm also concerned about, in many cases, people who do certain types of middle management tasks like kind of writing personnel letters or doing a lot of management decision making. Some of that will be automated away. Now, not all automation is bad automation. Sometimes automation, as your guest from Y Combinator was saying, gets rid of the rote work and leaves people doing more complex work. And a lot of us have benefited from technology exactly because our work is more interesting, more productive, and more creative because we don't spend time calculating. We don't spend time looking stuff up. We're producing rather than just assembling pieces, but not always. So take the example of, let's say, London taxi drivers. Well, an example, since 1865, they've been required to master this incredible body of memorization of all the roads and highways and byways of London. And it literally takes 3 years of training to master those things. Now, when electronic ride hailing came along, things like Uber and so on, it was the London taxi drivers were extremely upset, understandably, because of course no one needs that knowledge anymore. It's economically stranded. Not only does Waze know all the routes, but it also knows how much traffic is on those routes, something that you could never memorize. But the real problem for the taxi drivers, it's not that they didn't want to be more productive. It's not that they didn't want to route more efficiently. It's that the elimination of the need for expertise meant anyone could do that work, anyone with a driver's license in a modern vehicle. And that's exactly what happened. Huge numbers of people flooded into the sector. Wages fell. Good for consumers, good for those new workers, but really not good for the people who had that form of expertise. And this we see often, right? Like the longshoremen striking along the coast from the International Longshoremen Association in the United States. It's not that they don't want ports to be more productive. It's that they don't want their expertise to be devalued by automation. I understand that. I think it's a very difficult challenge. I don't have a good solution to it, but that is what we should be concerned about.
And on that point, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, you alluded to this earlier, but whenever there's a technological shift, whether it's the introduction of social media or the internet or computers, we hear a lot of promises from tech leaders that these technologies can close inequality and create new opportunities. What steps do we have to see those tech leaders take to ensure those promises come true?
Yeah, so I think leaders of large for-profit organizations are going to do things that are profitable. And that's not a fault with them, but what the profit incentive may not be aligned with what is socially valuable. And that's the challenge, right? And so how do we do that? Well, we have to shape this process. It's difficult to do, but it involves investment. It involves changing what universities do and giving them grants to do useful things. It involves labor unions and how they represent the voice of workers in shaping the technology. And I think it does involve providing incentives to tech companies. Now, I will say, I know a lot of folks at tech companies. They're often a little bit of a loss to say, well, how do we do this? Like what we do is we make machines that do stuff that people want us to do. What does it mean to benefit workers? What is that even like? What does that technology do? It's not like carbon dioxide. We know how to remove that from the air. How do we make a technology that complements workers? I think there's an answer to that question. And the answer is a technology that complements workers is one that allows people to, without elite levels of education, to do more valuable work. So if we see technologies that allow workers without a 4-year college degree, again, who are the majority of working adults in America, do more valuable health services, do more software development, do more legal services, do more valuable repair and contract and design. If we see a reversal of the growing power of elites and an increasing reward or demand for people with good formal skills who don't have elite degrees, that would be a valuable use of technology. That's a benchmark we can measure.
And we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you, we're starting to hear some companies talk about productivity gains from AI on their earnings calls. For instance, BP, Walmart have mentioned that this is allowing them to do things like coding for much lower costs. Can you tell me a little bit about when you think we might see those productivity gains that the companies are reporting show up in national economic figures?
Productivity predictions are usually wrong, and productivity gains are where they come from is very elusive. We didn't have very rapid productivity growth during the computer revolution, despite how amazing those tools were. So I'm reluctant to, make a strong forecast that we will see lots of aggregate productivity gains from AI in the short run. We are in the very early days. Most people are just figuring out what it's useful for and where you should never use it. We already do see examples in frontier science where AI is advancing the rate of discovery in microbiology, in mathematics, in materials discovery. So I do think it's going to advance the frontier of technology, and that will be important. It'll allow us to do better energy generation, better batteries, treat more difficult diseases. So I think it will be incredibly important, but whether that will show up in aggregate productivity statistics in the short run, I doubt it. I think most of the uses of AI at present, they're just the beginning, and a lot of them are, at this point more hype than reality. And even the work on, the productivity gains from generative AI in software development, there's kind of a mixed read on that. It does allow people to code faster, but it seems that the quality of the code actually suffers and there's more errors introduced and it's less reusable. So it's not clear that this is quite the miracle that it's going to be. I think it will be beneficial, but it's not going to be game changing. But I want to emphasize it's always the case that when new technologies are announced, people assume that because what it could eventually do, it should be doing tomorrow. And it usually takes a decade or more. The internet bubble in the mid 1990s, there was people expected to get rich overnight immediately with all these companies. Over the next 25 years, the internet has been incredibly consequential. It's reshaped the way we do almost everything, but it didn't happen between 1995 and 1999. It took another couple decades. We are just learning how to use AI and what it's good for, and it will take a while to figure out how to use it really productively.
Well, it will be fascinating to watch that over the coming years. David, we're out of time, so we're going to have to leave that there. Thank you so much for joining us today at Washington Post Live.
Thank you very much.
And thank all of you for joining us at Washington Post Live as well. For more of these important conversations, sign up for a Washington Post subscription and get a free trial by visiting washingtonpost.com/live. I'm Kat Zakreski, National Tech Policy Reporter here at the Washington Post. Thank you for joining us today.